Oh,
So this will be a demo of the Harbour WebView binding and demo app. First step, we'll compile. And it opens a window on my main terminal, my main desktop window, but I'm located here on a smaller window on purpose. So we can actually view it here. You can use your control minus or your control wheel screen to change your size. You are actually running a web page inside a window app. I added a little about window so we can actually see information about the application itself. The system the application uses has a built-in web server to render images, to load jQuery, and all the other JavaScript files. So one of the threads, so it's a multi-threaded application. For WebView to properly work, you need to create multi-threaded Harbour programs. If you only create single-threaded, you can only have one window. Most other developers in the Harbour community only make a single window because they use non-multi-threaded applications. So this is multi-threaded. To prove that we can have images working, I have another small window here. So this is just an image. And again, you can change your sizes. I can even default to opening a website as another window. And I can list, I think there are a couple of people wanting to enter. Okay. More to join. Hello, thank you for joining.
yes.
I started a small demo. No, I'm recording this. So if in the future somebody wants to see it again, we can do that. I open a few windows. I can list the windows. As you can see, there are negative coordinates because I opened this on a side window, multiple displays. By the way, when I open the windows, it automatically makes it relative to what I call the control window. Now, you don't need a control window, but I decided to have a main starting window. So I've got a small window here to actually set up a connection to a backend. I support Postgres, MariaDB, MySQL. I have it working for either. So I just did set it up to open localhost. Postgres, I'm storing a password in an environment variable. So I just have to remember what it is. And so if I open companies, I have a very simple company app. Let me make a new company. Verizon. I'm in the United States. Phone company. I don't know. HTTPS. I don't know. Whatever you want. So you can basically have your typical CRUD operations. You can go and edit. You can delete it. If you delete, I have a little jQuery warning screen that comes up. Say no, or I say yes. I deleted it. But basically, this is a very simple editing screen with a list screen all inside a window. In this demo app, if you switch away, again, if I display another person coming in, if you display the windows and it decides to reopen, instead of opening another instance of it, I just bring that instance foreground. Now, this was my choice. I just didn't want to have multiple windows for the same purpose. But you could have many windows. Internally, each window will have a number. These numbers get recycled. Now, I limit it to, I think, 100 windows that you can have up at the same time, but that can be made more or dynamically. But basically, that is how the C interface deals with those windows handles. The computer info here, basically, I'm calling one more person here. I'm calling a little Harbour code to actually find my local information. So this is not a web app. It looks like a web app, but it is not a web app. You're actually running Harbour code. Okay. Now let me actually there's one more fun. So this is by let me show the project. So we have two applications. We have one called a binding, which is basically an include file, an H file that will bind some C code to some C++ functions, which is what is required by the Harbour code. So you just compile once. It makes a multi-threaded DLL
¿no?
that can be called by the Harbour app. And all of the source code is available, of course. This is all of the different entries. Like this is, for example, to add the icons into your windows. If I need to return a value from Harbour back to JavaScript, this is how it's being done. So again, all the source code is available on the repo. I'm just going through this a little bit. It is a subfolder from the main demo. So you can get it by going to Web Bindings. And here is the VS Code workspace. So I always use Visual Studio workspaces to help me do the compilation. To come back to the demo, let me do a little change. Okay, so everything starts with a, there's a small CH file here for us, which will have our information version. I do use some other libraries I have in my repo, one for an ORM and want to support some additional functions that comes from Visual Fox Pro actually to make it a bit easier. They are not required. You have to strip them out, but I use them quite a bit. You can make your own database connections if you want. I don't deal with DBFs. I only access backend databases. So I kind of dropped using DBFs myself. But the ORM creates in-memory tables. So we still access in-memory tables. All right, the main program. Let me go here. Main. As I said, it's a multi-threaded DLL. We need an internal web server port. I use 8003 here. It can be whatever you want. A few variables, private variables that are going to be globally visible to all the threads. Config is to have any kind of settings that you want to be visible across all the threads. A queue. So even though Harbour is multi-threaded, the WebView toolkit is not. So every time we bind the WebView element to a Harbour thread, it becomes single-threaded. So that one kills it. It becomes single-threaded, which means that it's not possible to create new windows from an already existing window. But what can be done is from your window, you can send a message to the parent thread, to the root thread, to say, hey, create a window for me. So the queue is basically a messaging queue. I implemented a very simple messaging queue to communicate between all the child threads and the parent thread. Window manager it's an entry point to tons of methods to move, to create, to destroy windows. That's the one you're going to see and being used everywhere. So I'm setting up some global settings here on top. I do create my window manager object. So the reason, by the way, we have a object here is I'm relying on a method called a sync method in Harbour. A sync method is basically a method is marked as sync, which only one thread can execute at a time. So instead of creating mutex, like in normal multi-threaded apps, you can just use a method marked as sync. It makes it very easy. A few settings. So here we will load the DLL that the other project creates. So it's a DLL that is being used by your app. I remember the handle to that lib. And I need to set up a callback. You're going to see in the JavaScript code you tell JavaScript, execute a JavaScript function. It needs to match that JavaScript function to a Harbour function. For simplicity purpose, one JavaScript function is done to route all Harbour calls. Otherwise, the binding has to be updated all the time. And I'm going to show them the code. I create my control window. I'm going to show the code in a moment. This is how you create your first window. And then I need to go into a loop. Normally, we could have do the thread wait all, but I needed to listen to my queue. So I did set up that every half a second, I'll see, hey, is there something in my queue to be done, like creating a new window or anything else I may want to do at the level of the root. I think, by the way, I forgot, but somewhere up here, oh, this first thread is your web server. So I took the Harbour contrib, the web server in a contrib file, in a contrib of Harbour. I simplified it, and it's as one of the threads. So it's kind of like Electron, which has a built-in Node.js server. This is kind of the same idea for us for Harbour. I have our own web server inside of your exe. So here I have like functions, like I want to call a function. What should the function be? Okay, create a window. Like the open Google window, I have it here. Hey, if my cargo is open Google, I'm going to create the window that opens up Google for you. And again, O window manager is where you will be calling all the methods. So create window, I'm creating a window. A title, a position, top, left, width, height. If you're on your icon, and either you're opening a URL or you're providing an HTML. The first parameter that is not used here is a controller. Most of my windows, for each of my windows, I'm going to associate an object from a class, a generic class called window handlers. By using an object-oriented way of creating your windows, I can encapsulate, I can bind my properties that I want to exist between the different calls. And you're going to see that in a moment. And then, of course, quit. If you're trying to quit the action, then we exit the whole program. And I terminate the web server. This is the Harbour function that is being called from JavaScript, JS to Harbour. So that is known in the DLL to call that particular function. It will provide always a number of calls. So every time JavaScript calls Harbour, it is specific to the window. So you cannot call a JavaScript function outside of its window itself. But JavaScript is multi-threaded itself. So you may have many people click many windows, many buttons, or timers. Each of them needs to know, hey, this is this call that happened. So to keep track of the calls, WebView creates a counter as a text. So I need to keep track of it. And then when in JavaScript, I send something back to Harbour, it is a string. Now that string, by my definition, the first part is an action, what you want to do, and the second one are parameters. And then we have the window numbers. As I said, each window has its own number. It is a fairly simple routine. If I have a controller, so I try to fetch, does my window has a controller? As I mentioned, you can create an instance of the window handlers class associated with your window. If you have it, then you can actually control, you can do multiple things like call its function. So instead of having, so you can bind your functions inside that Windows code. So by standard, I made each window its own PRG to make it easier. So you can have the same function in different PRGs if you want to, or the different handlers. Now, something to be aware, I am using jQuery UI and Bootstrap to make the screens nicer. It's not necessary, but it's really helpful. But that's the best method I found to be able to gather the values of all the elements on the web page through what I call a serialize. We serialize all the values. jQuery has an option that say, hey, on the form, you have all of these objects, grab all of them, all of the values of all the objects, and when the, let me look a bit more normal here. When the callback is done to Harbour, I am capturing the values of every element on the screen. And that is being done through jQuery. So this is a generic series of HTML code that I highly suggest you including into your Windows. I know that Layton had mentioned some other JavaScript routine that could be used. So you're welcome to try it out. But this is where you put it. Okay.
Yes, I have talked about Svelte Kit or Svelte. This is very similar to jQuery, and you can make the handler for the JavaScript and send it to the Harbour, and then make the combination of about the same like what you're doing here. I will provide one example about that also.
That's cool. Thank you.
You're
Here's
welcome.
my queue class. I mentioned I have a queue. I have a push and a pop. It's a first in, first out. And here's the window manager, the one I mentioned, to deal with all the Windows control, like create window, terminate, change title, get the window number by the title, or get the window number by its thread, get a list of windows, move the window, run JS. You're going to love this one. While you're in Harbour, so you are in JavaScript. JavaScript's called Harbour. You can call back JavaScript again. So if you want to change the values of your form, that's the way you do it. You're in Harbour and updating your web page by using JavaScript. I've got some that are internal. Here they're internal. I couldn't put them as hidden methods because they are being accessed through different threads. So I had to leave them open, but it says it's internally used. Get my controller. So load config. Oh, so there are some methods to look. So we can have a text file. I have here the text file. Remember, I was setting up my connection to my database. So this is where I store what was entered on the database setup. Because when the database setup, there is no database yet. So I need to store it somewhere. So this is where it's being done. Again, those are utilitarian methods. So if you want to add some of your own routines that you want to make it aware of the windows, you can put them here. All right. So here are some of the methods I spoke about, the save, change title. I will not go to all the source code here. Some of those are used for the multi-threading, like create window and threads. Again, most of the code you will not touch into this main file, into the main root PRG. Most of it is not going to be there. I mean, you could, but I don't think you need. I got to get Zulu time so I can see the time appearing for me. So this is the main class you're going to be, I would highly suggest you using for all your windows, your window handler. If you use a window handler, it's going to store your window number automatically. Window number is necessary for all callback to the C library code. If you use a window handler, it remembers it for you. The controller is your method that you can use when the JS to Harbour is being called. So this is how you can wrap up your code specific to your window. And because you're going to make subclasses, each of those classes are independent. They won't step on each other. Return hash. When you communicate back to JavaScript, you can either run JS, run JavaScript code, or you can return some JavaScript value. Those have to be JSON. Again, we are very lucky in Harbour. We don't have to deal with JSON. We can do hash, and then the hash can be converted to JSON for us. Yay. So that's why this return hash we have again the call counter. Remember I said that every call from JavaScript, we need to know which one it is. That's why many of those methods have the first parameter as the call counter. And then you return a hash value. And you're going to see that in a moment. And a little bit of C to tie up your JS to Harbour. This is some of the magic. How Harbour from C, how to call a Harbour function. Again, Harbour is fantastic. There are some unbelievable things it can do. So let's look at the About screen, for example, one of the easiest one. So in the About, I have a method called create window about. I decided I want to get some default HTML. Remember I mentioned there's a default block of header with jQuery, Bootstrap, and all of those. I'm initializing the content into my variable. I'm adding the body. Now I'm using Bootstrap, so Bootstrap has something called a nav bar. I've got a button called close web window. So this is a built-in binding. So if you use this text close window, WebView window, it is going to send a quit for Harbour. It's going to send a message so Harbour will know to quit itself, to quit that window, that thread. A little spacer. And I'm making a little table where I'm showing the application version, the build number, the current application, so the generic stuff. And once I have this HTML, I'm going to create my window, not using a controller. I don't need a controller here because I don't have any button but close. There's nothing else to do. So I don't need some sophisticated logic. A title, a position left. I wanted to have the system make the about and out of the window relative to the control, especially when I move my control from one display to another. I didn't want to have my about screen appear on the monitor. So I moved it to be relative. So the top left with height, I've got an icon I want to use, and I'm doing HTML instead of a URL, because I can put a URL like a website, or I can make my own HTML. That's all that you need to do to create a window. So let's see where this is being used. So on the other window called the controller window, now the controller window, I also created HTML to start with. I've got a body, I've got a little JavaScript because I had a button that says, show me the version of JavaScript. I put it there. I've got my nav bar. If you remember, I had a quit database setup company about. I had 2 rows. So here I have a divider, another row, and I have on this second row, open Google, show image, get window information, move to top. All of these, the name of the JavaScript function is called callHB. CallHB is something I decided. And in the C binding, it will say, hey, if we have the text callHB, I am to call JS to Harbour. And whatever is in between here is going to be the parameter sent to it. Okay, so all of them are something. Because the controller window, the top window is doing different actions, you can have what I call a controller. Again, you create an object, a class called window handler controller from the root parent class, window handlers. I decided to use the one method that I care about. All the other ones can be used by the parent called controller. The controller is going to be called by JS to Harbour. And when I have the create window about, I'm going to push a message on the queue to create the window about. So call a function, and I'm making the reference to the function. So this is how I can easily create multiple windows from within one window. The cool thing about Harbour is the @, it's the address of the Harbour function. So you don't even have to use evals, it's directly stored in the program. Now you may notice this little timer here. What are these timers? Let me go to the beginning of the code here. And I commented out these codes. Let me uncomment this. Compile and run release. It's going to again open the window on the side for me here. And do you see little timers here? This is actually, every time this kicks in, it's coming from Harbour. The beauty of JavaScript is it has handlers, it has timers. I have 2 timers here being set. By the way, I did test this. I was running one at 10 milliseconds interval, 4 million back requests, and I had no memory leaks. And Harbour was keeping up. So JavaScript is actually almost as fast as Harbour itself, because internally JavaScript is compiled down to C. So even though sometimes we think that JavaScript is interpreted, it's actually internally compiled. Oh, here, by the way, the jQuery info. I said jQuery number. Oh, and by the way, move to top. Move my control window back to the top so you can see it here. So let's quit this and look at the code. In the first instance, I'm saying, time set up by JavaScript, call from Harbour, and I call the Harbour function timer 001. If I go here, I am going to call the run.js method. Remember, I says it from the window controller window. I've got this built-in method to call back JavaScript code. I don't need to tell the window number; it already remembers it. But in this case, I want to set up the inner HTML of a div called JSTimer1, which, let's look it up here, is right here. It's the span. I hope that most of you know some HTML, but I've got one span to the label and another span with nothing. This is where the code, the information from Harbour is going to be displayed in. So this is, I'm calling JavaScript code, hey, update the inside of that span with the Zulu time, any kind of text. So that's one method. The second method is a little bit cleaner. I mean, from the JavaScript standpoint. If I do a return hash, as I said, you're going to return a value to JavaScript with a JSON. I decided I'm going to have a field called info. I'm going to return the Zulu time, the memory use, and whatever else I wanted. Now let's look at this timer 2 here. And in JavaScript, like here, you have call HB. In JavaScript, you have, in a newer JavaScript, you have something called promises. Promises is this then. So the WebView binding with Harbour is going to send into the first parameter here, it's called the error notification in JavaScript, is going to send the JSON. It only has an info property, result.info, but whatever comes from Harbour, I was able to pump it into the JavaScript variable. So in this case, this is kind of a lambda, kind of like our code block, kind of JavaScript code where I am setting the inner of the timer 2 to be the result of the info. So a little bit of a different method, but I purposely show both ways of doing them. It seems that this method is a little faster. So if you have small amount of things to be done, send it as a return value instead of calling the entire JavaScript engine. So it seems to be a little bit faster. And I got my intervals here. Oh, by the way, for the kick of it, let's make this every 20 milliseconds. And compile. By the way, currently this requires the Microsoft Visual Studio compiler because I use something called CMake. I don't know yet how to make it with Ming. So for now, that's what it is. Now you can see how many callbacks are occurring here. It's really going up high. By the way, JavaScript has a little disadvantage. If you call the alert window, it stops all the other threads, all the other messaging from JavaScript. Just to be aware, don't use the alert everywhere. Okay. All right. Let me quit this. I will not give it a heart attack. At least you saw it running it. It was doing its thing. Let's look at the the cool one, the companies. Any questions for now, or are you okay? All right. Let's look at
Yes, sir.
the companies. Where is it? Companies. So in the case of the company, a little bit bigger, I did not want to create HTML up front. I just want to deal everything with a class, a controller class. So now I again wanted to remember what is the position of my control window. So when the application started, I remember where my control window is. Actually, I'll fetch. I remember the number of the control window, and I fetch its current position. I store the new array, and when I create my new window, I'm going to create it companies relative again to the controller window. But I use the first parameter called window handler, and I'm not sending HTML. So there's no comma HTML, whatever else. It's just the controller. So in this case, when I create a class called, in this case, window handler companies from the window handlers, again, that's in the main PRG, I decided I want to use more method, not just the controller, which is being called by JavaScript, but I have this built-in on open window. So if you don't use it, it's going to do nothing. If you do use it, this is your placeholder. What kind of code do you want to occur before the Windows is being built? In this case, I want to set up my database connection. What should happen after I terminate? Now, in this case, I can also keep track about, did I terminate using the quit button or did I close the window in case I want to do something different? And then I have a method called build window content. So if you use it, this is where you would create your HTML. So this will look very familiar, but this is where I'm doing my header. I'm building my content. The one little difference is I've got a method called cmode, mode. I'm using kind of Hungarian notation, by the way, the C for text. P underscore is for what I call a private property. Like I have some M underscore, like from some private method, meaning added method to the parent. So I don't ever clash my method names and my properties with the parent class in case I will add more data, more properties and methods. I don't want them to clash. And I basically have to keep track of, am I in a grid mode, in a list mode, or am I in an edit mode? So this is how I keep track of where I am. At first, I'm going to be in list mode. I'm going to, now, this is called the build window content after the on open. So if my connection failed, then I have a property decided called connect, object connection. If my connection is not there, I'm going to tell you not connect to database. So the window still opens, but it's going to tell you I don't have the database connected. If I do connect, I'm going to be in list mode. Now, so I create my own method for list mode, for listing. So if I look at the code for list, I have my own ORM, object-related model. So I will open up a database set, a result set on the company table. And I'm going to get its a PK, an integer, a name, a description, a site. It gets me an in-memory table, list of companies. I want to remember how many companies I found. If I don't have any companies, I'm going to say no companies on file. If I have some companies, I'm going to create a little the list here. Remember that list is being done here. So it's a standard bootstraps / HTML grid, name, description, website. And here's the code. Now, one little trick, the edit button. All of those edit buttons, I need to know the edit of what row. So the way I decided, I'm going to put edit dash the PK. So if I have edit dash, it means I'm intending to edit. Whatever is after the dash is a number of the key of the company I want to edit. Okay. Now, if I'm in edit mode, I decided I want to have a property called field values. So This would be an image of all the values in a database. The name, the PK, the website, whatever, is going to be stored as a hash value. So when I decide to go in edit mode, I may load the values. When I display it, it's called the view. This is what the MVC, the view method. I'm going to consume the values from this hash array. The best is, again, for you is to read the code. I'm just doing an overall idea of where things are. Otherwise, I'll be here for a couple of hours. Okay. And the controller method, so I've got the edit form on open window. This is where I set up the connection. I load the connection files by MariaDB, MySQL, Postgres. I set up my connection. Many of you may probably have a different way of dealing with databases, however you do it. Oh, and by the way, here in the ORM, I have a hash list of different fields. So if I add a new field, I just add it here. And when the database is open, it automatically adds any missing fields. So the ORM automatically heals its table, create them as necessary. And where's the controller again? Controller. So when you click this button, new company, I'm going to clear my list of fields. I have no fields. There's no PK, there is no name, nothing. So I clear the list of fields. And I'm going to replace the entire content of the form with the edit form. And I'm going to be in edit mode. When I hit cancel, I'm canceling from editing. So therefore, I want to redisplay the entire content of the entire form with the list version. If I save changes, now this is one of the nice things about the controller is that I pass to your controller a hash array called names and values. Every object, JavaScript, HTML object has a text, a name, an ID. In this case, it's the ID that's being used. Actually, no, the name is being used. So I had an entry field for the name, it's text name. For the description, it's here. For the website, it's here. So these become the variables I have. I want to test, did I give a name? If not, I'm going to make an error message, missing name. Otherwise, no errors. Okay, I'm going to save the value. So either I'm adding if the PK is empty, meaning it's a new record, I'm going to add it. If it's already there, I'm going to update it. So again, this is the ORM I use that I created, part of my repos. And at the end, if I have no errors, well, I'm going back in list mode. If I have an error, the only thing I need to do is just display what the error is. I already have all the fields on the screen. I already have all the values that you typed in, so you don't have to rebuild that. It's already there. Unlike a website where you have to, when you recreate a web page, you have to rebuild everything. Here you don't. But I just wanted to display the error on the screen. And then remember, in list mode, you can put an edit button. I have edit dash. So I basically strip out the word edit dash to get the PK I want to edit. And in that case, I just have to load into the list of field values, all the different values of that record, and I will go in edit form and just go in edit mode. And there's a little bit more tricky for the delete. Now the edit, the save. Save changes, where is it? You must, by the way, a couple of things. In WebView, unlike websites, you should not close your form. Normally in a web page, you have a form, and when every button happens, it becomes a post. It's being sent to the website. Don't do that. So even though we have all of these buttons to close normally the form, I return false. Do not close it. I can close it from within the Harbour app. I can call it terminate if I want to. But the same thing here, when I do a save change, if there is a caret sign after your action, whatever else is after is all the values of all your field. Remember I mentioned that I use jQuery to help me gather all the values of your entry fields? This is how it's being done. The form element in HTML, you can call serialize. and it's going to make a big text of all the values that you have on your form. And then in the root window handler, I'm going to unserialize that and create that global hash value that can be consumed everywhere. So this is the trick, another one of the big tricks of how to communicate between all the values that you have on your web page, on your window web page, and your controller action. Okay. I think this is more or less what you have here. Now I use Data Wharf, another open source project I have to create my schemas, but I can present another time. Do you have any questions, or do you need some more ideas before you go through this? We can probably do another session, another time after you look at the code. If you have some questions.
I have one question to you. On the beginning, you have shown me you have one web socket. I mean, this is, I think it's only socket, right? You are using for the communication.
Yes. So,
what is the purpose for that? What are you doing in that part?
okay. Let's look at the JavaScript, for example, the window handler, jQuery. In WebView, there is an issue with displaying either injecting an image, you know, the image tag of HTML. You cannot use like a local file path. You cannot use like file : / your drive letter and wherever it is. If you do that, most browser that the WebKit are using, because the WebView uses different browsers depending on the operating system. So on Mac, I think it used the Safari built-in engine, or which one it is, and there's documentation for that. Most of those cannot handle accessing resources that are on local drives. They always have to be URLs. They have to be a website of some kind. Because of that, like for example, here I'm using these websites, and I basically, every time you have a resource, an image, a .js, a .css, I'm going to prepend HTTP localhost, that port I pre-reserved, in this case 8003, / and then your content, like Bootstrap. I've got a Bootstrap number. I think in the image, where's the image? Show an image. Same here. Image source, logo Rainy Sailboat. It's an image I created with Midjourney. It's an AI-based image I created. So it has to be a website. Well, I don't have a website running, and I don't want to require the user to run a website and point their website to a certain folder. So in our case, at the beginning of the app demo, I'm going to tell setup folder, a website root folder. So I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to put all my JavaScript and all my images into a folder called files. So here's files. I've got Bootstrap. I've got my logo. So I'm basically having the Harbour web server, when it gets a request for an image for static files. So unlike the web server that was in the contrib, which is a smart one, I mean, you can actually make some Harbour code to run. I needed a very dumb web server. HTTP was enough, and the only thing I need to provide are static files. So it is a way to make a local file appear as a web resource. Was I clear, Laita?
Yes, this makes sense. Then basically now if you go to access the localhost and the port number / and the, let's say the logo name, then you'll be able to access this directly also, right? From
Yes.
the normal web browser.
Logo Rainier Sailboat is here. If I change it, it's not going to work anymore. Because literally on the image, I am expecting this name. When I'm using Bootstrap, I'm expecting the CS file, the CSS folder, and this Bootstrap min and this JS. So that's one of the problem of many other attempts that were done by Harbour developers to make web views to work. They did not have this. And this is,
Right.
again, one of the reasons I really had to go multi-threaded. And I was looking at the way Electron works. This is like a light version of Electron, because Electron binds in a particular browser. So here, your executable will not have a browser in it, but will have a web server in it. And in Electron, like Slack, Teams, Skype, all of those are Electron apps. So this is kind of like a lighter version. The caveat, the problem, is that if you have a little bug with a web browser, well, then we have a little problem. Hopefully that doesn't happen often. I found one glitch though. I think you saw it before. Let me run. It's kind of a weird little glitch. Bring my window here on top. Oh, by the way, by default, I have a little text file here, a little console that shows up, tells me my port and where I am. This can be turned off. In the Harbour HB. So if you don't want the GUI, if you don't want the console, turn this off. This is what you do. So again, I use the Harbour build process. And here are my libraries I'm binding. So let me go back.
Was you able to open the inspector inside the WebView?
Yes, thank you for that. So in the CH, I have a new option called Allow Developer Tools, 1 or 0. So it by default I have it 1, meaning yes, I have the inspect. So yes, thank you. You made my life a little bit easier. By the way, just for you guys, I showed this to Leighton yesterday. So if you go,
can you do one quick test? Can you open the WebView, open the inspector? So basically, in this web server, the light version, the web server you have now, if you click to the options network, yeah, then you'll be able to see here all your requests if you open another dialog or refresh the page.
is it? Let's maybe do on the image.
One button to refresh.
Oh, inside of it?
Yes, to the first screen.
This one? No.
Yes, go to the network now. It's not showing. It should be here visible to you all the files. If you, well, let's try this. Click into that option, disable cache. Yeah, now go to the first screen you have, the dialog, the main one.
F5 maybe? Yeah. I hit F5.
There you go. Yes,
So,
and here you can see the output. So if you click in one of those files, you can see the header. Yeah, did you see the URL? So this is the local you have.
where is the URL? In here? No.
When you put the cursor over the file name, then it
There it
shows
is.
you the.
So you can see it, localhost, the port.
Yes, and if you need to see the file, for example, right click, open new tab, then you can see directly the file also.
Okay, it's open in my other browser. Okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, this helps sometimes to debug.
Now, I don't have a error handler yet. And sadly, the Harbour debugger seemed to not behave well or crash in multi-threaded. So I will need some time to try to find a way to fix it, or maybe beg for Antonino to fix his stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's going to be willing to do that.
Probably by the message I see on the GitHub about him, he will not be available.
Yeah,
he's working something else.
So we may have to roll up our sleeves and look at his code and find out how to make it multi-threaded ready.
Yeah.
So Anything else?
No, everything looks fine and clear.
Anybody else has any question, or are you guys okay?
Okay.
Horacio, since you're here, did you get this, or would you mind answering any question or asking all the other participants in Spanish if they need something else?
Yes, absolutely. Eric quiere saber si tienen alguna pregunta y no, o algo no quedó en claro y no lo pueden expresar en inglés. Me pidió hacer de intérprete. Así que siéntanse libres de preguntar.
I guess everybody's either stunned or okay. Okay. By the way, I'll stop recording.